and intending that fiction to manipulate you. So in a sense, when we sit down and watch a TV show, right, we are drawn into the world. We accept the characterizations. We accept the assumptions and so forth and so on, what they call the suspension of disbelief. Now, at one level, everything we're watching is false, isn't it? Those people aren't really who they're pretending to be. Their inflections and tones do not reflect feelings they really have, and so forth and so on. And yet, because they're good at what they do, we accept it and are drawn into that world. Well, imagine that you're dealing with people for whom every aspect of public life is that kind of acted-out fiction. They're pursuing their objectives, and they just want to get you to come in and believe the world is what it needs to be so that they can achieve their power, achieve their objective, achieve what they want to achieve. That's Barack Obama. And to say he's great at that, it's just that we're not used to having such thoroughgoing actors with no respect for truth in American politics. Yeah, we're used to liars. People lie. But underlying it all, there's been this assumption that the aim somehow is still to respect the truth. That's not the case with these folks because they don't believe it anymore. You know, the notion of the self-evident truths that establish our rights, that show clearly that justice somehow has a basis that isn't just based on the power of those who rule over you. They reject all of that. It's I think, right now very striking to us because Americans kind of have had the luxury of taking it for granted that overall this is not what American life and politics was about. But now we're having to deal with a very real fact that this way of doing politics, which overtook Europe, which overtook countries in the third world, and which radically transformed those countries into gulags and hellish places of oppression, it has now come to America.
Wow. You know what? I rarely have epiphanies these days from guests. I mean, I get a lot of good points, a lot of good ideas, but you just actually shifted my perspective. I mean, I know it's a matrix. I know it's a facade, a Wizard of Oz lie, but the way you just explained it, you're right. It's that the mainstream media and the system is playing to his tune with such choreographed precision that it creates a whole Disneyland of lies. So it's not just Bill Clinton saying I didn't have sex with that woman or lying about, corruption. It's that the whole thing's a lie.
Well, exactly. They are creating, as it were, a perceived reality that serves their purposes. And, of course, the ground started to be laid for this years ago when these people started that phony mantra, perception is reality. Perception is reality. This is not true. Not if God exists, at least, because there is a principle of reality that transcends human perception and understanding, and is the basis for making real judgments on a rational way about what is right, what is wrong, what should or should not be done. They reject that notion of having such a basis for morality, and the only standard they claim is a scientific one. But of course, remember, science cannot tell us anything about what is right and what is wrong, what is just, what is unjust. Science can't address that in any way.
Sir, we've got limited time. We've got about 12 minutes left, and I'm even going to skip this network break so we have this time with you because I've got several other questions I want to get to and certainly have you back up in the near future. Very honored to have Ambassador Alan Keyes on with us today. Very thought-provoking. Especially, perception isn't reality if the person giving you the perception is putting false data in or lying or distorting. I mean, if you're wearing a headset of virtual reality goggles and you see a flat green field you're walking in, but really you're about to walk off a 100-story building, right, you're going to fall and die. The goggles are lying to you. Perception isn't reality, but that was just me backing you up there.
Think of it. This is exactly what they were trying to do with this healthcare business. Sell it on the basis that we're going to give everybody access, it's going to be better, and it's going to be less costly, and all of this. And then when you started to get into the detail, it wasn't actually less costly. They were just going to shift the distribution of the cost so that the elderly citizens and so forth were going to be targeted in particular for rationing so that those costs could be distributed differently. They said, well, everybody's going to have access and so forth, but the burden of paying for that suddenly shifted so that instead of coming out of the corporate profit, it will now come out of the taxpayer coffers. What does that mean? It means that invisibly and quietly, the working people are being made to pay for what they were not paying for in terms of the present arrangement.
And the government's got a whole new tax to pull out of your paycheck. Now we got exactly. We've got 10 minutes left here. I want to ask you quick questions now. Eugenics, from my research, Ambassador, is the foundation of these control freaks. They believe we're all just blobs of protoplasm, so why not get rid of 80% of us? United Nations Biological Diversity Assessment 96, State Department Memorandum 200, Eric Holder, all these other people, John P. Holdren, Ecoscience, Population, Resources, Environment, calls for forced drugging the water to sterilize us, forced abortion, CPS taking basically all children, raising them in government hives. And I have all these other government textbooks, and you're a learned person, I know you're aware of this, exposing the whole abortion agenda, which is only one level. And then he unfreezes the money for forced abortion, and where they say, oh, you'll get the welfare in Africa, but we've got to sterilize you. Can you speak to John P. Holdren and the whole eugenics situation and what Margaret Sanger and the whole abortion industry really is?
Well, this is one of those things that is one of the reasons I had been so clear about his absolute adamant commitment to this whole abortion thing, so that he carried it as far as saying that babies born alive should be allowed to die because their mothers wanted them aborted. That is a reflection of what you're talking about. Sometimes people think this is just about the specific particular murder of that baby that abortion itself involves. No. You look at Margaret Sanger, that woman was about a strategy based on eugenics for basically cleansing the world of the inferior people. It is an inherently elitist understanding that sees no value or intrinsic worth except in those lives that stand up to the measuring rod of these elitists as somehow valuable to humankind. In one respect, it turns out that as the left-wingers move down this road, they are implementing a dehumanizing understanding. But instead of dehumanizing people based on the racist notions of somebody like Hitler and the things that were being portrayed in Germany, they dehumanize people based on the scientific understanding that there's nothing essentially human about us, that we are, in that sense, just blobs of flesh and chemicals and junk that can be manipulated like any other physical thing. And that, of course, means that there's no boundaries whatsoever that you have to respect except the whimsical boundaries of personal attachment, so that if you're part of the favored clique, you might be treated differently. That's the world they're pushing us toward. And abortion was essentially the cutting edge to get people implicated in a moral understanding that destroyed our sense that humanity and every single human being have a moral worth that must be respected by the power of government, that can't be disregarded on the basis of some elitist measuring rods of who's worth having around and who can be killed with impunity. That
Ambassador, isn't this really the religion of control freaks on power trips, where Peter Singer says, let parents kill their babies for a year after they're born, get rid of the old people, they've got the same value as mackerel. I mean, these are quotes saying an old person has the same value as a fish, that a retarded child needs to be killed, and I found they really are the ultimate racist, as Margaret Sanger wrote in her own letters to W.D.B. Du Bois. She said, I've got to hire black men to be my fronts to get rid of these black weeds. In my research, I found that the real racist, the real Nazis, always cloak themselves as liberals, and that it's even more than that. It's not just some pseudoscience and their excuse to play God, that they ravenously enjoy going after Asians, Africans, Latin Americans, poor people. It doesn't matter. And that they even have people of color in their ranks who enjoy this.
Well, the sad thing is, underlying it all, there is an element of what I call self-worship involved in this. that is involved in the fascination these elites have for themselves and their own power and the confirmation they see when they enjoy a little success that somehow they're better than everybody else. That even, by the way, accounts for their so-called compassion, because it affirms their superiority to see themselves from a height helping the downtrodden who, because of their inferiority, couldn't do as well, and so forth and so on. But remember, that kind of self-worship has an implication that goes to the very heart of religion and faith and spirituality, because it denies that there is anything other than themselves that is worthy of that kind of real reverence. And so it is premised at the end of the day on the banishing of God from the consciousness of human beings. And that's why people like myself, who put a great stress on the American Declaration, on the fact that our unalienable rights come from the hand of Almighty God, we are their deep enemies, because we will not let people forget the existence of God and the fact that most of us accept that and believe it.